transmitting from Montclair State.
Miguel Perez's column appears every Wednesday and Friday in The Record, North Jersey's daily intelligence report. The Record, proud supporter of NJN.
Next on Images y Imágenes, a century of hidden Hispanic heritage. Saludos, welcome to Images y Imágenes. I'm Miguel Perez. There is no logical way of denying it. Latinos have a long history of contributions to North American society, a history that has been left out of the textbooks and the classrooms of this country. Some corrections have been made lately in some schools with multicultural education programs, but generally North American history has always been written as if time began when the Pilgrims landed, a blatant distortion of reality. Even if we are born in this country, sometimes Latinos are treated like foreigners, recent arrivals. But the truth is that our ancestors arrived here first, and that many parts of the United States were settled by Spanish explorers more than 100 years before the Pilgrims stepped ashore on Plymouth Rock in 1620. They established settlements in Florida, California, and throughout the Southwest. They discovered the Mississippi River, San Francisco Bay, and many other North American landmarks. And yet everything that happened here before 1620, more than a century when Latinos made many contributions to this society, have always been played down or totally ignored. And the same goes from the contributions we've made during the last 2 centuries, especially the Hispanic lives sacrificed to defend this nation. The hidden heritage of Hispanics in North America. That's the issue we'll be debating here tonight as we speak to a historian who has spent many years on a personal crusade to fill those gaps in American history, the gaps that exclude Hispanic contributions. Joe Monserrat is a former member of the New York City Board of Education, former director of the Office of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and an activist, a community activist involved in many other issues concerning Latinos. Mr. Monserrat, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be with you. My first correction, not 1 century, 3 centuries.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Let me just say before we go on that I consider myself a disciple of yours, because it was many years ago, more than 10 years ago, that I first interviewed you on this subject when I was doing columns, a series of columns for the New York Daily News.
I remember.
And I was inspired by everything that you had to say. And now when I go out and speak, this is my favorite subject. Oh. So, and I've gone on to read quite a lot about this issue. And I think it's something that we have to talk a lot more about and a lot more often in the Hispanic community. One of the first things that you said to me that struck me is that this country is as much Spanish as it is English. Tell us about that.
Well, there's a perception that American history begins in 1608, Jamestown. But the fact is that by the time the Pilgrims arrived here, American history was 100 years old. I say that the United States is as much Hispanic as it is English, because it's from La Cuna de America, from the West Indies, that the United States begins to be born. In 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon, Puerto Rico's first governor and Puerto Rico's first migrant, comes and discovers the state of what is now the state of Florida. Discovered is a word that we all understand that it was there, but we're using that word because it's easier. But anyway, he comes, and this is the beginning, the first contact with this, what is now the United States, comes from the West Indies, specifically from Puerto Rico, and we begin. Now the next trip is Arayon comes, and he brings another group, and he settles for a while in what eventually became Jamestown.
Right.
Now, each one of these people are bringing things. They bring horses, and they bring things which begin to green America. they begin to green. Johnny Appleseed came 2 centuries late. Before Johnny Appleseed, we began to bring to this country almost everything that was later brought by the British. We begin by bringing the horse and the cow and the pig and the goat and the chicken and and alfalfa and hay and wheat and sugar and you name it, and we brought it. The one thing that people have difficulty is thinking in terms of centuries. Now, when we say this happened, we begin to talk about the 16th century. That's right. American history starts in the 18th century. But we have to remember that the first movement from Europe occurs in 1493, 1494, Puerto Rico, Cuba, all these other places discovered. By 1508, we're beginning to establish in the Caribbean, in the Spanish-speaking world, a beginning of a new civilization.
One of the things that really struck me when I first interviewed you on this subject is that you basically painted this picture in my mind. You said America was not settled or discovered or explored from east to west, as American history books lead us to believe, but from south to north.
That's right. Well, yeah, the first settlement is not north. It's in Florida, San Agustin, the oldest city in the United States, 1526 or 36, I forget. But that's on the East Coast. In the middle, from Mexico, up north from south from Mexico, heading north, we begin to move into what is now New Mexico. This movement begins in the explorations before with Coronado on one side, Hernandez on this other side. All of this is happening, and all kinds of things are going on, and the British have yet to arrive, because the British arrived late in the United States. And the reason I say that the United States is one of the largest Hispanic countries in the world is not just because our population in terms of numbers makes this one of the largest Hispanic countries in the world.
The 5th largest, I believe, in the world by population.
By population. But the Spanish language and Spanish values and aspects of Spanish culture have been a part of the development of the United States from the beginning. In fact, it was, in some places, the beginning. And none of these things are new. In fact, Spanish influence and Spanish culture and Spanish reality is so embedded in the fabric of the United States that we don't know it when we see it. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the most American symbols is John Wayne, walking down a dusty street in his cowboy outfit in a town. Now, the town is usually a Spanish town, but what most Americans don't recognize, and by Americans I mean all of us, is that from the top of his 10-gallon hat to the tip of his spurs, everything he has on is Spanish in origin.
Why doesn't history, American history, recognize that? There is a hidden heritage there.
There's been a struggle for a long time in American history. Most American history is written up in New area, the Harvard areas, etc. And there's a big movement to keep people from thinking that the United States developed along the lines that other countries of America developed. And to accept this would mean that this is not just a British country. You know, the poet Walt Whitman said something that I have a note here that I should be able to find in a second, which sort of points out the fact. Back in when Santa Fe was celebrating.
Well, I have a quote here from Mr. Whitman while you're looking for yours. It might be the same one.
It is the same one.
We Americans have yet to really appreciate our antecedents. Thus far, impressed by New England writers and schoolmasters, we tacitly abandon ourselves to the notion that our United States have been fashioned from British Isles only, and essentially from a second England only, which is a very grave mistake.
Absolutely.
Walt Whitman in 1883, 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago.
Now, if you want to know why it's not taught, there's a historian, an American historian, who is specialized on things of the Southwest. His name is Herbert Bolton. And Herbert Bolton wrote one of the first textbooks on the colonization of North America. And when he went to have his book published, they wouldn't accept it. And one of his biographers, another historian named Banyan, tells us why it is that they won't accept this book by an American historian about the development and the civilization and growth of North America. And this is what he says. He says, "The story of this book is a rather fascinating bit of American historiology. One of the editorial critics to whom the publishers submitted the manuscript was positively scandalized. First, he said, the matter of proportion. Nearly, if not quite, 1/3 of the whole is divided before 1606. Now, how could there be anything before 1606? Before there were any permanent English settlements in America. Mm-hmm. Nearly twice as much space is given to the early period of exploration and than to the whole part of the revolutionary movement from 63 to 83, 1730, which is to say, the least impractical in writing books." Now, from that, they simply have not, they have eliminated. History in the United States is taught very selectively.
But it's not just a question of what is omitted, but let me read something that you said to me and have you expand on that. 10 years ago, you said that you have to wonder why Spanish explorers are depicted as people who did not settle or colonize, but merely explored, sought gold, and killed Indians, while the English are pious and industrious and came to build homes and establish settlements and raise families. It's a perception also.
Well, it's called the Black Legend. The Black Legend is, you see, Spain beat out all of the great powers of Europe. Spain was here 300 years. Spain did a lot of horrible things, but Spain did also a lot of wonderful things, a lot of very developing things. And the Black Legend, which was used by the British and the Dutch and the French as they began to come and take and raid those things which were Spanish, they did it in the name by saying that the Spaniards only came to look for gold and to kill the Indians and to go back. In the meantime, in the first 50 years of the Spanish presence in the New World, they built 200 cities. In the first 50 years, they colonized, they settled half of the continent. We begin to get some of this settlement from the English, but the English never really discovered, they rediscovered. The English never really created, they recreated, because everything that they came to do had been done already. And it's an attempt to maintain the concept that this is a nation of Albion's seed, Albion being Old England, that 85% of the American public has no relation to British. But to this day, we're still saying that this is a British nation. And in order to keep that myth alive, they eliminate the contributions of other things. And there are other people who contributed. Europeans in the middle part of the United States, Swedes in the Minnesotas, and the French who came down. All of these people are seen as incidental to American history. And the fact is that the Hispanic contribution, and I use the word Hispanic different than most people. The Hispanic people I'm talking about are American. These are the descendants of the original conquistadores. Because, you know, this goes in three, again, I go back to talking about time. The first 50 years, well, what is the first 50 years? From about 1500 to 1550. 1500 to 1550. Now, in this time, by 1550, we had ranches with cows. We had horses. We began to seed the horse. There were no American cowboys until after 1848. American cowboys did not exist because cowboys are Hispanic.
Let's get back to the education, though, because it's when you mention that these Hispanics are Americans, these Hispanics who are American, who don't know their history.
That's
it's
correct.
a problem within our own community. I mean, you know, it's through no fault of our own that we don't know that we have heroes in the Hispanic community.
It's very, of course we have heroes. You know, in 1776, when on the east coast of what is now the United States, we were signing the Declaration of Independence on the west coast, Juan Bautista de Anza was discovering the city of San Francisco at pretty much the same time.
It's not San Francisco Bay, it's San Francisco Bay
right.
for a reason.
That's, of course.
You mentioned Ponce de Leon. I think we've mentioned Hernando Cortez,
right.
who commanded an expedition that founded the first settlement in Southern California in 1536. By the way, San Agustin was 1513. 13,
no.
Before 36.
No, 1513, well, it isn't. It's a little later now.
But it's before 1536.
Oh, yes, it's the first, exactly.
Because the first Southern California settlement was in 1536. Hernando de Soto, who discovered the Mississippi River and went all the way up through the Mississippi, actually was buried in the Mississippi 100 years before the Pilgrims landed.
He was drifted down the river so the Indians wouldn't find his body at that time. Yes, and in all that time, all of these expeditions were leaving behind goats and sheep and horses, and America, what people found when they came were already seeded. And this is the contribution of the ancestors of those kids who are Hispanic today. A Hispanic kid can't turn around and say, hey, I helped my people help create this nation. This is what's the horror of. Not only can't the Hispanic kid say that, he's never learned that lesson, but his classmate has never learned that lesson. Nor has his black brother and sister learned about what the blacks contributed. You know, the first cowboys were Indians, and they were blacks because to punch cows, to take care of cows was work that Spaniards didn't want to do. This was hard work. It was not for 2 centuries later before they entered the picture. But it's a little bit ironic that the first cowboys were Indians who developed an entire nomenclature of the lariat, the lasso, from Spanish.
De Soto explored the territory that later became Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And yet, history books tell us that Lewis and Clark were the first white eyes to see the North American wilderness. 250 years later.
Well, before that was the Coronado expedition.
That's right.
You know, they went up and went to the entire South, up as north, as far north as Kansas. When one of Coronado's lieutenants went into Arizona, and he wrote back a report, and he said, "Hemos descubrido el hoyo más grande del mundo." We have found the biggest hole in the world, and that was the Grand Canyon.
Right.
You know, when you travel in the Southwest, you read on the barks of trees the names of sergeants and other soldiers who were there in the 1600s, in the 1700s, in what is now, and again I repeat that not only do kids not know that this is so, but when they do learn it, they learn it as an incident. This is an incident, an accident of history, not history. It's an accident that the fact that the cowboy was Spanish, well, that, you know, but it isn't just a cowboy. The entire cattle industry. The cattle industry comes from Spain, from the Mesta of Spain. The first cattle drives were in the area in Andalusia, in the Extremadura, the place from which many of the conquistadores came. The first sheep come from there. The Mesta, what was equivalent to the Association of Cattlemen, where they regulated the brands, where they regulated the way in which sheep were kept, and which would later take it in and became part of the American way in which we deal with cattle. The mining laws.
We are going to deal more extensively later on with the Western heritage and the cowboy tradition, the original cowboys, as I like to think of them. But let's talk a little bit more about the Spanish explorers and the people who colonized, the people like Bernardo Galvez, who also fought in the American Revolutionary War, the contributions to this country's wars by Latino. Bernardo de Galvez is the namesake of Galveston, Texas.
Right.
Few people know that.
No, it's, well, the fact is that few people know that the Spanish helped in the American Revolution. The American Revolution began first as a struggle of 13 colonies against the mother country, England. But then it became an international war. It became an international war when France came on the side of the Americans and when Spain came on the side of the Americans. And it's these aspects of a civilization, again, that we don't know.
They don't know that Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Venezuelans, and Mexicans fought in the Revolutionary War, and they won major battles like in Pensacola and Mobile, and that they not only contributed men, but they contributed ammunition, money, ships.
They tied up the Spanish fleet so that the Spanish fleet couldn't get, I mean the English fleet, the Spanish fleet tied up the Spanish fleet so they couldn't move, and it was very important too, the success of Washington and the Revolution in the United States. Yeah, this is the reality. American history is taught selectively. American history is taught not only selectively in terms of where it happens, but when it happens. Because if you begin history at the time when it becomes part of what is the English part of the world, then this history is American. But to say that the history before this was Spanish history, or part of the history of the development of America, this is not done. And this is something which we're still trying very, very hard to fight. And I think that very often this business about revision history, etc. No, we're not trying to teach a new history. What we're trying to say is that history has to be taught to include all of the people who participated in it.
In the 1960s and the 1970s, throughout this country, there was a movement to fill those gaps that have been left with the contributions, regarding the contributions of African Americans. There were Black awareness courses, as I remember they were called, and that has never really been done as well as it should be with the Hispanic contributions.
Certainly not on the East Coast. On the West Coast,
there's more of it?
A lot, yeah. In the Middle West, for example, they've celebrated the 400th anniversary of Coronado, and they do a lot of it. But certainly in this part of the country, no. You know, one of the problems, again, is that many of our neighbors, our fellow citizens, are very recent arrivals. And we are a people of America. We are not a European people. Hispanics are a people of America. The Hispanic that I talk about is the amalgam of the European Spanish influence, the native Indian influence, and the 12 million Africans that were forced out of Africa. This is all part of an amalgam which begins to be the creation of the American. And it's a very special creation, because these are the people who do not come from Europe. They were born here, they were developed here, they did not cross, and their interest is primarily in the New World. This becomes difficult for some people to accept, to understand. And so if you are taught, if you go to the X School of Education, and the methodology of the X School of Education is to teach XYZ, then what you're going to teach the kids is XYZ.
Sometimes, though, it's our own responsibility, our own community. Sometimes I'm a little bit critical in my column, for example, of Hispanic Heritage Month, because unlike Black History Month, which is all about lectures, which is all about teaching, which is all about exposing those role models, we tend to do too many parades, too many cocktail parties on Hispanic Heritage Month, and not enough of what we're doing here today.
But you know, Miguel, we have a problem. We're very almost schizophrenic about it. Because we have a problem. For the longest time, the Native American aspect and the African aspect of our heritage was pretty much denied and was all Hispanic. And all of a sudden, we want to change this. And so we change it by denying that there's any Hispanic in our background. And this has created a great deal of problems. This business of are we Latinos or are we Hispanics? Or this
Within
becomes,
our own community.
Yes, this becomes an issue which is not a very big issue, I don't think, in relation to what you're talking about. So that we still have to begin to learn about ourselves. And the difference about us is, you know, we Hispanics from all over the world, from all over the Spanish-speaking world, live in the United States, and we have some new things happening to us. You from Cuba and me from Puerto Rico, we are citizens of the United States. Mexicans, we are fellow citizens. And this whole new fellow citizenship relationship is a new one, and we're a little concerned about it. Because don't call me Hispanic, call me Puerto Rican. Don't call me this. Well, okay, we can understand that because we're still insecure about this. But we are having and developing a whole new, you know, the Time magazine the other day, not too long ago, came up with a picture.
Yeah, the composite picture of what the new American will look like.
It took 300 years to make the people of Latin America. It took 300 years to make Cubans. It took 300 years to make Puerto Ricans, Argentinians. The United States is only 200 years old. We still have another century. And it's in that century that we, the people of America, are in the making. The United States, it's not only graying, it's also browning. And there is a new, because of the change in the demographic realities of what is America, we are now to the point where Time magazine goes and has a computerized picture of what an American of the future is going to look like.
And she looks very Hispanic.
She looks very, 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 very.
Well, we're going to go on. We're going to go on with another show. Next week's show, we're going to continue talking about all of this. In that show, we're really going to deal a lot more with the cowboy tradition. And we're actually going to present some entertainers who are going to illustrate what that tradition is all about. Next week, in Chapter 2 of our history lesson, we'll explore the contributions of Latinos to North American music, dance, culture, the language, and the traditions of the American West. The first cowboys. Guess where they came from? I'm Miguel Perez, and I hope to see you next week on another edition of Images, Imágenes. Hasta pronto.
To purchase a copy of this program, write to NJN Video, CN 777, Trenton, New Jersey, 086250777. Please include the date and time of the broadcast in your request.
Miguel Perez's column appears every Wednesday and Friday in The Record, North Jersey's daily intelligence report. The Record, proud supporter of NJN.